Hi guys, so let's go over how to do our SOCS with some examples. So if we look at this sheet, our SOCS practice, it says the histogram shows the sizes in acres of 36 vineyards in the Finger Lakes region of New York. Write a brief description of this distribution. So whenever you see brief description, we're going to use SOCS. So our first one we're going to talk about is shape. So what I always do, no matter what type of function, or excuse me, what type of distribution it is, I always go over and draw an outline, just like that. That way you can kind of see what it's doing and get an idea of what the distribution looks like. So if we look at shape, this only has one hump in it. So that is what we call unimodal. And then we also have to talk about if it is skewed or symmetric. Because the tail is longer on the right side, we are going to call this skewed right. So those two things are what you answer when you talk about the shape of a graph. So now let's move on to outliers. And if you look at your notes, outliers, you always mention any outliers. You always talk about gaps. So to me, this guy right here looks like an outlier. So we're going to say the outlier of this is from one outlier from 240 to 280. So these are 40 apart. So this would be 160, 180. Then we talk about gaps. So this has a gap from, let me change colors, here to here. So that's our gap. So one gap from 180 to 240. So shape and outliers. Outliers, we talk about outliers and then gaps. So now let's talk about center. So center, it asks if you had to pick a single number to describe all the data, what would you ask? It says if the distribution is unimodal and symmetric, the center is right in the middle. If it's skewed, then it's a challenge to find. So we're going to say center is in A because our graph is skewed right. So any distribution that you get that is skewed, you do not have to find a numerical answer for your center. And then lastly, let's talk about the spread of the graph. So spread is talking about how tightly clustered the graph is. So if we look, we're going to say clustered around the maximum or the extreme. So extreme just is another word for maximum. And then we also talk about the range. So remember, range is our max minus min. So our range is 240 minus 0. So the range is 240. So when you're describing a distribution, these are all of the things you need to include in your description. So if you look, we talked about our SOCS, our shape, outliers, center, and spread. Okay, let's do the next one together. So it says sugar in cereals. This histogram displays the sugar content of 49 brands of breakfast cereals. So we are always going to start by outlining our graph. So go up, come down, go up again, come down. That is our description or our outline of our graph. So if we talk about shape, oops, that's pretty thick. Hold on one second. So the shape of this graph, if you notice, it has two humps right there. So this is called a bimodal graph, meaning it has two modes, two humps, okay? And if we also look, it kind of looks symmetric, okay? So we're going to say symmetric because it's definitely not skewed. Well, let's put non-symmetric because it's not perfect. And in statistics, we want to be as close as we can. So let's put non-symmetric. Because once again, it's not skewed, but to be perfectly symmetrical, everything would have to match. So we just want to be careful with how we write it. So now let's talk about our outliers. So if we look, this one right here looks like an outlier. So once again, these are going up by fours. So this is 60 and 64. So we're going to say one outlier from 60 to 64. Oops. And then we have gaps. We have a gap here and a gap here. So we would know that we have a gap, so two gaps, one from 24 to 28, one from 56 to 60. So that is how we describe the outliers and our gaps. If we do center, even though this is not perfectly symmetrical, this is also not skewed. So if we look, our center looks about right there. So we're going to say approximately 32. That is how we're going to say the center looks. And when it's bimodal, the best way to describe the center is between the two modes, like what we drew with this green line right here. Then lastly, we're going to talk about the spread of the graph. So spread, we are going to talk about how it's clustered. So we're going to say, once again, clustered. And all that means when I say clustered is how the bars are up here. Are the bars spread out? Are they more clustered together? So this one is clustered around the extremes. So remember, extremes means the maxes, which is like here and here. So those are the extremes. And then lastly, for spread, we have to find the range. So range is our maximum value, so 64, minus our minimum value of 0. So the range is 64. So that is our entire shape, outlier, center, spread, or our SOCS for this graph. So what I want you to do on your own is to complete the SOCS for this graph and then pause the video and then check back and see if you get it correct. Okay, so look and see if you got the same stuff as me, and let's go over it together. So our shape, if you outline the shape, it is unimodal because it only has one hump, and it is very, very, very close to being symmetric. If we look at this right here, The front is just a teeny bit different than the back. So if you put non-symmetric for that, I'm okay with that too. But for the sake of this example, I'm going to go with symmetric. So our outliers, there are no outliers in this one, and there are no gaps. So the outlier one was pretty easy. Center, if you look, I have drawn right here that our center is our tallest bar. So our center is 14.5 to 15. And then our spread, it's clustered around the center, meaning the bars are close to the center. And the range is 17.5. Oops, I messed up. It is 17.5 to 12. So that is 5.5. So our range is 5.5. All right. Have a great day.